Hello and welcome to the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. In our fellowship of Christ, our leadership in the local church, and in our parenting of the children entrusted to us, we all seek forward momentum. This podcast is designed to provide that momentum in our God-given roles of leadership as we partner together to equip today's Christian leaders for tomorrow's opportunities. I'm Eric Miller, and we have the Reverend Jeffrey A. Bogue back with us. Jeff is in the house. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time.
We've done like hundreds of, no, not hundreds. We've done
hundreds.
5 podcasts without you.
That's very, very different than hundreds.
It feels like hundreds. It feels like it's been a long time.
Have you missed me, Eric? Is that the problem?
Missed you. The only time we get to talk, Jeff, is when we talk on the podcast.
It's true. Actually. That's actually true, everybody. We have meetings 3 times a week, and Eric lives at my house. But beyond that, we never see each other.
Yes. Yeah. Well, welcome back, Jeff.
Thank you. It's good to be back at this podcast of this ministry that I'm in charge of.
That you get to run. I love it. Yeah. So today, Jeff, we have a very, very... Are you ready? I'm glad you're sitting down. We have a very tough topic.
Very difficult. Very edgy.
We're talking about communication.
Oh, that'll fire off a lot of emails toward us.
You and I just got done doing a marriage counseling session with me, so thank you for helping me learn how to communicate with my wife. So
that's right.
We're not going to talk about that anymore. We'll put that aside. But let's talk from a parent's perspective and a pastoral perspective. I think this is honestly, when you think about it, this is kind of a big topic for a lot of people as we figure out how do you communicate clearly.
Yep.
I've one of the favorite phrases of mine lately is unclear is unkind. I think I heard Brené Brown say that. I don't know who said it first, but unclear is unkind. If you have set of expectations and you don't communicate well, it's our human nature. We want to live up to expectations. So how do you communicate even as a parent to your kids or in a work situation with volunteers that maybe you're leading? Let's kind of talk through that a little bit. Maybe let's start as a pastor. Let's put our pastor hats on the experience that we've had in leading teams, leading our staff, with volunteers, ministry leaders. How do you communicate with your various audiences? What does that look like? Walk us through that.
Yeah, so first, I like to say why this is important, because if I was listening to this podcast right now, the minute you said communication, I'd start zoning out and be you're going to teach me organizational tips, and I don't think that's the heart of this. So if you're listening, keep listening here, and let me say this, that I like to say that trust is the currency of ministry, right? So if people don't trust us, then we cannot do ministry with them or with their kids or period. So trust between a pastor and a congregation, a pastor and a parent, parents and children, etc. Trust is a currency, and it's a currency of ministry. It's a currency of family. It's a currency of love. It's all those kind of things. So communication is not about effectively getting a message out. That's marketing. Communication is about trust. And can I trust you? Can I trust you to make a wise decision? Can I trust you to be mature, etc.? And I just happened 2 nights ago to finish teaching. I'm a professor with Grace College in Akron, and I just finished teaching a class. And one of the things I said to my students is, I think, important to this. So when we talk about communicating, I think about it generationally, right? So since we talk to a lot of pastors and youth pastors, many of you are young in your career. I didn't say you were immature or anything like that, but you're getting your first job, so you just came to a church, right? And so you're trying to build trust. Pastors who have been at a church for a while or maybe have changed ministries, they're trying to build trust. If you're a teenager and you happen to be listening to this, communication's huge for you because it builds trust. I tell my children, communication equals freedom. You tell me where you are, what you're doing, you get freedom. If I have to go find you, you're getting locked down, right? So communication equals freedom. And then for a parent, communication equals heart connection. Making sure that a kid actually hears what you mean and not just what you said. So all that's trust, right? So for those of you who are like in that younger phase of your career, or maybe you just transitioned, maybe you're my age, but you just transitioned to a church, maybe you're an intern, a resident, or a youth pastor, this is why communication is so important to you and why it's hard for you. This is what I was telling my students the other night. We grow up in a system, and it's not good or bad, it just is. We grow up in a system that's an education system where everything is communicated to us. So be at class at this time. Here is what you're going to do today. You may eat lunch for this many minutes. And then you get into like college. Here is your syllabus. If you skip more than 2 classes, you flunk. Here are the expectations of the course and the outcome, right? Everything is communicated to you. So because of that, what happens is we don't grow up communicating. We grow up being communicated to. We receive information. We don't often have to give it in a way that other people can make decisions off of it. So when you're young in your career, or you're young in a new ministry, when you're new is probably a better word, when you're new in a career or new in another ministry, you are waiting to be told what to do and why to do it, and people you're waiting to receive your instructions. What's hard for people who are new places is that they don't realize that they are the instruction givers instead of the instruction takers, right? The quicker you realize that and the better you become at it, the faster your trust will grow in that ministry. So for like somebody who's a youth pastor or a new on staff of the church, you need to start communicating, here is my 3-year plan. The kids are going to go to this place, be there this long. Here's the address. Here's my cell phone number. Here's a way to contact me. We're going to be back at this place. If we're running late, I will send something out on the group text. And for most of us who are new in ministry, us old people would call that professionalism. For you, that's a habit you're going to have to pick up. Because if you're a youth pastor or youth worker, and you have my child somewhere in the middle of the night, and you were supposed to be back at 10, and now it's 11:30, you know that the bathroom break took too long, or you know that the trailer blew a tire. I don't know that. So I'm sitting in a parking lot after I got myself out of bed, and I'm frustrated, and I'm angry, and now I'm worried, and I'm scared. And when you come in and you're laughing that off, I'm looking at you like I just sent my child out with an immature college student. And I disrespect you because you couldn't send a text, right? So it plays.
That sounds like
that.
a very hypothetical situation.
No.
Just hypothetically speaking. No, Jeff, I like what you're saying, because I think we all have to understand how we communicate and to see the other side, the other perspective. And oftentimes some of our young leaders, people that are maybe getting their first job in ministry, we're of the generation where we're used to communication being over text message or social media and not face-to-face. We're not used to doing that. We're not used to having to articulate our thoughts, or we do it on text message with things like emojis or shorthand or code or whatever. And that's unhealthy, because so much of communication is body language, your tone of voice, your posture. Those things play into it. And so like the scenario you're saying where the youth pastor or the youth leader comes back and they're laughing, and that feels disrespectful to that parent in that situation.
Yeah, and I would say, like, guys, when you're thinking about communication, and I'm thinking of this as I have teenagers, I'm a father, I'm also a boss, and then I'm also a pastor, like, who needs to communicate. So I would say this: information can come through a text.
Right.
Right. So, hey, the trailer blew a tire. Everybody's okay. We're going to be an hour late.
Yep.
That can come through a text.
Yep.
Interpersonal communication needs to be face to face. So one of my mentors is Ed Lewis, who used to lead Momentum. He used to say, if it's positive, write it. If it's negative, say it. And I've picked that up. I don't know if that was original to him or not, but I picked that up and I've kind of followed that. Like if I have to talk to you about your kid, I'm going to ask to sit down in my office or a cup of coffee or whatever and do that.
Yep.
If I'm going to say, Billy did so incredible on the service project at Urban Hope Philadelphia, I'm going to text that to you.
Yeah.
And if I have information, trailer blew a tire, we're going to be an hour and a half late, I'm going to text that to you. If something happened, hey, somebody hit the van, I'm going to call. I'm going to clearly communicate that to a person who's going to walk out to the parking lot where all the parents are waiting, huddle them up and say, hey, everybody's safe, but there was an accident.
Yep. Here's what's going on. Yeah.
Now you take that's kind of the professional side of it. I would take that then into every aspect. So if you're a high school student, college student, you have to be listening to this. If you want to interact with your parents, Mom, the movie's running long. Is it okay if I miss curfew by a half hour?
Yep.
It's one thing. That's different than, Mom, I got in trouble at school. Right. And so I would tell my own kids that I'm like, you have something difficult to say to me or something that you want. You sit down and look at me and we'll work it out.
Yep.
You don't text me those things. But if you say, Dad, I know you said to be home at 11, but blah, 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 blah. Can I be home at 11:30? 95% of the time, the answer is yes, if you communicate. If I'm sitting there and you walk in at 11:30, like you probably lost your car for the next weekend, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And then I would say the same things to parents. The communicating to teenagers, this is my little experience. I have found takes the right windows and the appropriate amount of time. So when I am conveying information, I want you home at 5. The family's going to go that's a text. I said it. Just do it, honey.
Yeah.
If I'm addressing a concern about your character or your life, or I'm going to sit down with you, but I pray about this a lot. I'm going to ask God to open the right window. And then I'm going to try to ask the Holy Spirit to guide me, like their defenses are down, we're together. And I found that when I force an issue, and sometimes you have to, but when I force an issue, it never goes nearly as well as when the Lord opens a door and we're able to kind of naturally talk. And then when I say appropriate amount of time, I don't mean more time. I mean, I have, Heidi and I have 6 children, and then, we've inherited daughter-in-laws here, so our family, and they're wonderful, but keeps growing, but raising the 6 kids. I found that there's some of my kids that what they need is an hour to express themselves. And then I found that there's some of my children that like you take them past 5 minutes and they're gone. So like trying to know them and trying to ask God for those windows. If I have to address it right here, right now, they're just going to have to get over it. I'm their dad for a reason. But if I'm trying to really win their heart, that's a big part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So knowing your audience, knowing who you're talking to, that principle can apply to more than just, because you can be a leader of a ministry and on a staff,
right?
And your employees think differently. Some of them have different models and mindsets and gifts and abilities and love languages, and you can go into all that. And so knowing who you're talking to is the principle you're helping to instill here.
Yeah, if I'm back in the leadership world, I'm talking to my volunteers. I'm talking to, in some of our cases, employees. I want to know that person. I want to understand what connects with them. I want to know that If I say it this way, it discourages them. If I say it this way, it inspires them. I want to know, does that person need frequent communication? Do we need depth of communication?
Right.
I'll use you as an example, Eric. You're my friend, but you're also my employee. I know that you don't need hours. You need 3 touch bases. You're like, just kind of keep me moving. I got it. I got it, right? You're a smart guy and a very good leader. And so you're like, I got it. I'm like, okay, well, we had never worked together, but we've been friends for 20 years, but we never worked together before. So like we had to figure that out. And then you would have figured that out back to me. Like Jeff wants bullet points.
Yep.
He's going to read that email, but maybe not respond to it, which is a poor communication practice. All those kind of things.
Yeah.
But
if I need you, I'll show up at your house.
yeah, that's right. I was going to say, but you also know if you need me, you can interrupt me.
For sure.
Right? And so like I don't mind it.
Yeah.
This kind of thing. So you just have to learn those things.
Yeah.
I think the other big thing, as we're talking about this, then is preaching and teaching. And so I think when you're thinking about communication with preaching and teaching, number 1 rule of communication is know your audience. Number 2, in some ways, is know yourself. So some people can hold an audience for 30 or 40 minutes. Some people can't.
Yep.
And you have to know, it's not a big deal. You just have to know that. There's a pastor on our staff, Pastor Nate. He's a phenomenal leader, incredible leader of individuals. But he will say, please don't make me preach. I'm not good. It works against me. I don't like it. It stresses me out. But I put him into a small group. He's better than anybody at it, right?
Yeah.
But he knows his audience and then he knows himself, and that makes him the effective communicator.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I think even in that like the currency is trust. As we build trust, that does mean knowing your audience. Sometimes that even means, like you're saying, owning your own shortcomings or owning your own weaknesses, or I think giving permission to the people that we're communicating with. When we own those things, it helps to establish trust.
Yep.
It helps them to realize, like, okay, I see that in you, but I'm glad you know that about yourself. Now we can talk openly, freely about those things. The other thing that I've learned, even in my years of being a youth pastor, is there's times where I want to have a meaningful conversation with a student. And I'll think, okay, let's go sit down and get coffee, or let's get breakfast. And it turns awkward. Like the student that I'm trying to like invest in and encourage them and support them or disciple them and pour into them, they like will shut down on me. Where, we're at a youth group meeting or at an event and we have a phenomenal conversation. That's the root of that, where they're saying, I want to go deeper in my faith. And then we sit down. And what I learned is it sometimes is the face-to-face that like they don't know how to do that.
Right.
Students especially, maybe you're teenagers, if you're a parent, they don't know how to do that. But there's something magical about like riding in a car together where you're looking at something and you're not looking at each other. And so taking a car ride, my dad and I used to do that a lot. When we needed to have a conversation, he'd say, let's go for a ride. Instead of going to get breakfast, he'd say, let's go for a ride. We're not staring at each other face to face. Or even like, let's go work on something together.
Yeah.
Let's go do a project together. Let's go, rake leaves, or let's go do something that we can do and experience together. But it allows the focal point to be on that and not necessarily on each other. Those things, when I was able to do that, it would open up the conversation to a whole new level, and these students would then feel comfortable to start sharing things.
It's know your audience. We've said that a few times in understanding that. And I think it's huge. We say here at Momentum, and we say at Grace Church where I pastor, you cannot over communicate.
Yeah.
So that's a fallacy. When you look and say, I've said it 5 times, I would look at you and say, good, maybe they heard it once.
Right.
And so I think knowing that audience, whether it's being a parent or being a pastor, and looking and saying, I need to say this. With parenting, usually when my kids are like, I know, Dad, and then they quote me, I'm like, okay, I've said it enough.
Yeah, yeah.
With
They have the inflection and the tone of voice
Yeah.
and the sarcasm all down too.
with the church and with Momentum, the bigger the room, the poorer the communication. So the bigger the room, the poorer the communication. So what you're communicating, making announcements on the weekends is the worst form of communication. The more I can break you in to get the right people in the right room, the more that we can walk it through and invite them in to think it together.
Yep.
That's a great thing. But you cannot over communicate. The bigger the room. And I would make social media one of those rooms. Social media is like the worst place to communicate. Like we put it out for 5 weeks. Like nobody read that.
Yeah.
If they're even on, if your stream even comes across their feed.
Right.
So nothing is better than tap you on the shoulder, look you in the eye.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
That's not always possible.
Right.
So frequency. I would say to youth pastors, make sure, and youth pastors especially, make sure the channel of communication is one that's used by your audience. If you're a youth pastor and you email your kids, you're wasting your time. You must text them. If you're a youth pastor and you're texting parents, you might be wasting your time. You may need to email them. Social media is not a way to communicate with parents. It is a way to communicate with kids, etc. Don't message a parent on Instagram,
Right.
etc.
You might have to find multiple avenues and multiple ways to hit the wider the audience too.
That's exactly it. You cannot over communicate. So, like, I put it out there is not an answer. I put it out there 15 times to the point. In fact, if you listen to this podcast, you experience this from Momentum to the point where you're like, I can't believe they're sending me something again. I can't believe they did it again. I can't. And like, right.
Sorry.
Because 30 seconds after you read what we sent you, you stop thinking about us.
Right.
So that's true in your world also, your personal world.
Yep.
You think about as a youth pastor, if I said to you as a youth pastor or as a pastor, tell me your sermon from 2 weeks ago, you would have trouble thinking of what you even spoke on.
For sure.
And you digested it and worked on it. So think of the person who heard it.
Yep.
So now I'm going to give a 45-second announcement and expect you to know the details and understand that if you want to go to Momentum with us, this is everything that you have to do. See what I'm saying?
Yep.
So we just have to be aware of those things. We live in the communication age, and so people expect that from us. And I think the hardest transition is from like college to ministry. You have never been responsible, probably, to do it.
Yep. Yeah, that's really good. So, Jeff, we have probably a couple minutes left. There's one aspect of this that might relate to our pastors that we're trying to partner with. How do we communicate with our volunteers?
Yeah.
The people who are faithful, they're serving, they're showing up week after week or maybe on a rotation. How would you recommend, what are maybe some principles that we could give them in communicating with a volunteer? Somebody that maybe our expectations are still high, but they look different because of that relationship where they're a volunteer.
Yeah, so I would, some of it depends on the size of your ministry, but if we kind of picked a normal youth ministry that we say we had 30 or 50 kids and you had 5 or 10 volunteers, what I would do is this. I would have a group me message for volunteers that just keeps a stream of information flowing to their phones. I would have a once a month volunteer lunch or something like that on Sunday.
Yep.
And if your volunteers have kids, set up childcare for it. I think it's really important that volunteers see and interact with other volunteers because it can feel isolating. If you're a small group leader, you're interacting with 7th graders and you don't really remember that there's 4 other small groups happening. So anything that can get them on the same page. if you're going to launch an initiative, so I got a new vision, I got a new thing, take the time here at Grace Church, we call it prior and privileged. That your most bought in people should receive prior and privileged information. So take the time to walk those volunteers through, even individually, through what your vision is and what you want to do before you tell the kids or make a big announcement.
Yep.
And if you have staff, the same thing would be true of your staff, including like your secretary. Right. And then let them speak into it so that vision becomes theirs too, and they can own it. I had 4 years ago, we did a major financial campaign at the Bath campus of Grace Church. I would have had probably 150, 175 meetings before I said anything publicly. And those meetings took place obviously over the course of several months. So 6 months before I said something publicly, I had really downloaded privately. The bigger the change, the more important that is. So welcome them in, enter them in. I would, if you have 5 or 6 volunteers or volunteer families, I'd have a once a month meeting. I'd have a group meet. I'd have a quarterly one-on-one breakfast with them, and just get together and pastor them and see how they're doing.
Think it through. Be we like to say be proactive rather than reactive. So put your plan in place. How am I going to communicate? Not just right now in the moment, but over the long haul. Give clear expectations. We've talked a lot, even just internally, about having job descriptions is important. Making sure that people know what they're expected to
your
do.
Volunteers should have job descriptions and what are my roles and what's my commitment per week, and then duration. Is this a 1 year? Is this a school year commitment, a 1 year commitment, or am I leading a small group for the rest of my life?
On ramps and off ramps.
That's right. Sabbaticals. Take a break. Here is your clear return date. We're tired. We want to take the summer off. No worries. How about you stop June 1, but you begin September 1? And you guys get a rest in there. That kind of stuff.
Good. Well, Jeff, this is helpful. I know I've learned even some new things. Hopefully our listeners have been encouraged. Hopefully our communication has been clear today.
I don't know what you're talking about, Eric.
There you go. Well,
I never understand what you want me to do.
This is where we're just going to end the podcast. Thank you, friends, for tuning into today's episode and talking about communication. As always, if you do have questions, if there are topics that we can help be a resource to you, we'd be honored to do that. We'd be honored if you would send us your questions. You can email them to us at info@buildmomentum.org, or you can DM us on social media, even though we already said that's a terrible form of communication, but we would love to hear from you. Also, we'd be honored if you'd subscribe to this podcast, leave us a rating and review. That does help others to know about this, and it allows you to know about the upcoming episodes. So thanks for tuning in today for Communication with Pastors and Parents.